Stephen arrived home from his business trip late in the evening, still wearing the slight fatigue that came from a long flight and a restless mind. Usually returning home meant the comforting aroma of something cooking on the stove, his daughter Lucy bounding out of her room with news from school, and little Toby rushing into his arms, chattering about every small discovery he had made. But tonight, something felt off as soon as he placed his suitcase by the door. The apartment, typically alive with chatter and footsteps, greeted him with an unfamiliar silence. Only a dim light shone in the hallway near the kitchen, and there was no comforting smell of dinner lingering in the air. Instead, the room held a kind of tension that made him uneasy. He wondered if Anna, his wife, had taken the kids out for a surprise or if something else had happened. He took off his coat and listened carefully. The only sound he could pick up was the soft rustling of pages or maybe fabric, but it was too faint to identify. Then he heard a voice, quiet, hesitant, calling from somewhere near the bedrooms. It was Lucy. She emerged looking anxious, clutching her tablet like it was a shield. Stephen opened his arms, expecting the same enthusiastic greeting, but she only approached slowly, her face mirroring a worry he couldn't yet understand. With a nervous look, she whispered that Anna wasn't home. Immediately, Stephen felt a pang of confusion. Anna rarely left the children alone in the evening, especially when he was away. She was always so meticulous about family routines, about making sure Toby had his bedtime story and Lucy finished her homework. He crouched to Lucy's level, asking calmly where her mother might have gone. Lucy hesitated, biting her lip before admitting she had seen Anna leave with a man in a black SUV. She had glanced out the window as the vehicle pulled into the lot behind their apartment building. The man stepped out. Anna greeted him, and together they drove away. Lucy described how Anna had looked, smiling, talking animatedly. She seemed happy. Stephen felt his stomach churn. Who was he? Lucy didn't know. She had never seen him before. Stephen's heart pounded, and he forced himself to breathe slowly. An avalanche of questions threatened to swamp him, but he had to remain steady for the children's sake. He reached out to Lucy, pulling her into a gentle hug, assuring her that everything would be fine. That reassurance felt hollow, echoing in his own mind as an empty promise. He went into the kitchen to see if Anna had left any note or clue about where she had gone. The counters were clean, the fridge held a few leftovers, and there was no sign of dinner preparation. The family calendar on the wall had no mention of an outing or appointment. A creeping sense of unease settled on Stephen's shoulders. He thought back to the last few weeks. Anna had seemed a bit distant, but he had attributed it to her own work stress. She had been working later hours sometimes, returning with vague explanations about team projects and deadlines, or how she had to help a colleague. Stephen, never prone to jealousy, trusted her. He believed in communication, in respecting each other's space. Until now, it never occurred to him that something deeper might be amiss. Lucy gazed at him with those eyes that wanted answers, but she was also afraid of what those answers might be. Stephen told her to go to bed, promising to handle whatever was going on. Then he walked through the apartment in a daze, every corner of each room feeling unfamiliar and strange. Without Anna's presence, without her warm voice or the sense of normalcy that came from a well-kept routine, the place felt cold, like an empty shell echoing with potential secrets. He tried calling Anna's phone, but it went to voicemail. He left a brief message, masking his worry behind a neutral tone, saying he'd arrived safely and was wondering where she was. Hours passed, and Anna didn't come back. Lucy eventually fell asleep, but Toby woke up crying, confused that his mother wasn't there to soothe him. Stephen tried to calm the boy, telling him that Mommy might have just stepped out. Toby nodded but clung to his father's arm, sensing unease in the usually reassuring tone Stephen used. By midnight, Stephen sat alone on the living room couch, the television playing softly, providing a hum of distraction. He tried to read the expressions of actors on the screen, but his mind was too scattered. Scenes from the past few months replayed in his head. Moments where Anna seemed lost in thought, her phone lighting up with messages she rarely allowed him to see. Flashes of her returning late, apologizing for being delayed at work. He had taken her words at face value, not because he was naive, but because he believed in trust. Now that trust was a question mark. He caught himself glancing at the clock every few minutes. Where was she? Who was that man in the black SUV? Why would she leave the children alone at night to ride off with someone else? He tried calling again. No response. Eventually, exhaustion overcame him, and he dozed on the couch, waking abruptly at dawn to find no sign of Anna. Lucy was already awake, staring at him nervously. The weight of responsibility pushed him to get the kids ready for school, to keep them calm. But inside, he was torn in 100 directions. He replayed Lucy's words again and again, trying to see if there was any other explanation. Could it be a misunderstanding? Could Anna have been in some kind of emergency situation? But Lucy had seen them talking, laughing. Nothing looked forced or frightening. That day, Stephen went about his routine, though he felt like a puppet on strings, performing basic tasks without emotion. He dropped Toby at daycare, then Lucy at school. Both children asked about Anna, but he had no new answers to provide. He assured them he'd find out the truth. And that promise fueled his next steps. After leaving them, he contacted the building's manager, a man he knew slightly because they had worked together installing a new security camera outside the property. The manager allowed Stephen to review the footage from the past few days. He hunched over a small screen, scanning hour after hour for the moment Lucy had described, half hoping it wouldn't appear. But there it was. The black SUV pulling in, Anna stepping out of the building and hugging the man at the driver's side door. Stephen's chest tightened. He watched them climb into the SUV and drive off. Her face was illuminated for just a moment by the overhead lights, enough to see a clear, warm smile, a smile that wasn't meant for him. Later that same morning, he reached out to a friend who had contacts in the local vehicle registry. Within hours, he had a name. Daniel Sullivan. That name meant nothing to him. He found Daniel's social media, recognized the man from the profile photo. A successful entrepreneur, it seemed, always posting pictures of fancy dinners and weekend getaways. The sight of Anna in that context made Stephen feel cold. He also noticed Daniel had a wedding band in older photos, maybe a year back, suggesting he was married. A wave of nausea hit Stephen. It was more than just suspicion now. It felt like betrayal. Yet still, a tiny voice in the back of his mind asked if there could be a logical explanation. Was Anna working on a side project? Did she owe Daniel some sort of favor? Or was this a true affair, hidden behind nights of fake deadlines and half-hearted excuses? Stephen returned to the apartment in the afternoon to find Lucy quietly reading in her room. Toby was still at daycare, so the home was mostly silent. As he tidied up, his thoughts churned. He wondered if he should confront Anna immediately or gather more proof. That evening, well after sundown, Anna finally came through the front door looking cautious. She moved quietly, not expecting to see Stephen. When she noticed him seated at the kitchen table, her eyes flickered with uncertainty. He said nothing for a long moment, just studying her posture, her uneasy shifting. Then he calmly asked, "Where were you last night?" At first, she claimed she had stayed with a friend because she felt ill and didn't want to disturb the kids. Stephen lifted the flash drive that contained the security footage, placing it on the table. He waited for her to speak. She stared at it, her expression shifting from confusion to a flash of panic. Slowly, the truth, or at least part of it, began to emerge. She admitted seeing Daniel, but insisted it was harmless. "He's just a colleague from a different department," she said. "He offered me a ride home." But Stephen could see her mask slipping. She stumbled over her words, contradicted herself. Her voice took on an edge of desperation. Lucy, drawn by the raised voices, peeked from the hallway. Anna's excuses grew tangled as Stephen challenged her. "A colleague, you say? Is that why you looked so happy walking out with him at midnight, leaving the children alone?" He tried to keep his voice from rising, but anger simmered. Anna defended herself, claiming Stephen was blowing things out of proportion. But her eyes betrayed the fear that he knew more than she could spin. When he mentioned Daniel's last name, her face went pale. The tension broke in a heated argument, words pounding the walls like fists. Lucy shrank into her room, tears streaming silently. Toby was mercifully asleep, or he would have been terrified. Accusations flew, and Anna's explanations grew weaker. Finally, Stephen couldn't bear to hear any more. He stood abruptly and grabbed his jacket, leaving the apartment with a slam of the door, needing to breathe, needing space to think. He wandered the streets aimlessly, feeling the winter chill cut through his bones. He let the cold air numb him, if only to keep the roar of betrayal from consuming him entirely. He thought of Lucy's anxious face, of Toby's innocence. He knew nothing could be solved by running away from the confrontation, but he needed time. Hours passed before he returned, just before dawn. Anna had locked herself in the spare bedroom, or so it seemed. Lucy was asleep on the couch with tear-stained cheeks. Stephen sat beside her and gently brushed the hair from her face, guilt weighing on him for letting her witness the storm that broke their home's peace. He managed to doze for an hour or two, mind racing the entire time. In those silent minutes before sunrise, he realized the life he knew was crumbling. The trust he took for granted felt irreparably shattered. But he also remembered the children, Lucy, on the cusp of adolescence, and Toby, just a little boy who needed warmth and security. Stephen resolved to get to the bottom of this, no matter how painful it might be. A glimmer of determination stirred within him as he stood up to face the morning, uncertain yet resolved in the knowledge that everything had changed. He paused to reflect on the significance of these recent events. Memories swirled inside his mind, a whirlwind of images that carried both warmth and pain. Every moment of happiness he once cherished seemed overshadowed by the cold realization of what had been lost. Yet within him, a determination sparked, an unyielding drive to rebuild what had fractured and to protect those he loved most. Outside, the world carried on with indifferent momentum. Cars rumbled along the streets, the sun rose and fell in its habitual cycle, and neighbors murmured about mundane routines. But behind Stephen's closed door, an emotional battle raged. Doubts, hopes, and questions all fought for prominence, leaving him weary yet resolute. In the quiet hours of the morning, he would sit alone at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee in his hands, staring at the walls that once echoed with laughter. The ghosts of memory would drift across his consciousness, pressing him to acknowledge how much had changed and how much more would inevitably transform in the days ahead. Each day brought new details to unravel. Each conversation revealed nuances of heartbreak, regret, and the faint possibility of forgiveness. But trust, once shattered, was not easily repaired. It required honesty, a willingness to face past mistakes, and the profound courage to move forward without the familiar illusions that once provided comfort. In moments of solitude, Anna wrestled with her own thoughts. She recalled the first time she met Stephen, the early days of their marriage when everything seemed bright and full of promise. Perhaps time had eroded that bond, or perhaps her own flawed choices had shattered the foundation. She wanted to turn back the clock, to fix what she had broken, but reality offered no such mercy. Lucy found herself caught between childhood and adulthood, forced to confront the complexity of betrayal before she was ready. She felt anger, sadness, and confusion, sometimes all at once. Late at night, she would text her friends vague messages, searching for empathy, for understanding, for any reassurance that normalcy could return. Toby, too young to articulate the swirling emotions in his chest, clung to the simple joys of day-to-day life. A cookie after school, a warm bedtime story, a playful hug. These little anchors grounded him in uncertain waters. He yearned for stability, for the mother and father he remembered before shadows crept into their home. Helen, on the sidelines, watched the family unravel with a heavy heart. She did her best to offer practical help, tidying rooms, preparing meals, walking Toby to school. But she also knew that emotional wounds require more than chores to heal. She spoke gentle words of encouragement, quietly shaping a space where they could begin to mend, if only they chose to step onto that path. Around them, the physical environment mirrored their internal storms. Rain pattered against windows, as if lamenting the lost harmony. The wind howled on restless nights, rattling doors and stirring uneasy dreams. Even on sunny days, the brightness carried an edge of uncertainty, reminding them that clarity can sometimes reveal hidden cracks. Through it all, hope lingered like a faint glow. It glimmered in the possibility that people can change, in the belief that love, though bruised, might still exist in unexpected corners of the heart. The journey would be long, the outcome uncertain. Yet each step forward, no matter how small, carried them toward a horizon that promised a chance at renewal. Stephen's next step was to solidify the truth. He took the kids to school, maintaining a semblance of calm, then returned to the building manager, who allowed him a longer look at the security footage. This time, Stephen combed through different days. Sure enough, there were multiple instances. The same black SUV arriving late at night, Anna stepping inside, driving away with the shadowy figure of Daniel Sullivan. The repeated evidence left no room for misunderstanding. Even if Anna insisted it was innocent, the tender smiles they exchanged and the secrecy of these late-night rendezvous told a different story. His emotions churned, a brew of fury, hurt, and a strange sense of resolve. He refused to let confusion paralyze him. Instead, he sought clarity. Armed with the license plate details, Stephen reached out again to his friend who worked in local law enforcement, asking for any background on Daniel Sullivan. He discovered Daniel was indeed a local entrepreneur, dabbling in different small businesses, some legitimate, some more questionable. The friend advised caution, noting that Sullivan had a reputation for manipulation, especially in personal relationships. Stephen felt his throat tighten. It was one thing for Anna to befriend a colleague, but quite another for her to entangle herself with someone known to leave collateral damage. He returned home, feeling like he carried a secret weight in his chest. This knowledge, though clarifying, only made him feel more lonely. Was there something lacking in their marriage that drove Anna to another man? He tried to recall any major argument or event that might have led to this, but no. Aside from the typical stress of family life and occasional disagreements, their relationship had seemed stable. Or perhaps he had been blind. While Lucy was at school and Toby at daycare, the apartment was eerily silent. Stephen found himself pacing in the living room, the mid-morning light casting harsh lines across the floor. Finally, he decided he couldn't wait in limbo any longer. He pulled out his phone and called Anna repeatedly. No answer. He sent a concise text. "We need to talk. Come home tonight." Then, as an afterthought, he added, "Please." Hours passed like thick syrup. He busied himself cleaning the kitchen, sorting through mail, and replaying every relevant memory in his head. He realized now that Anna had been gradually withdrawing. Small lies, carefully timed phone calls she stepped out of the room to answer. But each time he felt a hint of suspicion, he brushed it away, not wanting to be that distrustful husband. Lucy returned from school, tossing her backpack on the couch. She gave Stephen a wary glance. "Did Mom come home?" she asked softly. He shook his head, noticing her disappointment. Toby bounded in next, oblivious to the tension, excited to share that he drew a picture of a dinosaur in class. Stephen mustered a genuine smile and praised Toby, carefully setting aside the drawing on the fridge. In that moment, the contrast between Toby's simple joy and Stephen's roiling anxiety was almost unbearable. Evening descended. Stephen prepared a basic dinner, pasta with tomato sauce. Lucy picked at her plate. Toby chattered on about his day. The seat at the table where Anna typically sat remained empty. Every so often, Lucy's eyes flicked to it, as though wishing her mother would appear and make everything normal again. Toby asked for Anna twice, and Stephen gently said she was still out, doing something important. The lie felt bitter on his tongue. At 9 o'clock, the key turned in the lock. Anna stepped in, clearly startled to see Stephen standing in the hallway. "We need to talk," he repeated, voice controlled but thick with tension. Lucy was in her room by then, and Toby was already asleep. Anna put her purse down and began stammering an apology about being late, about having to help a friend. Stephen cut her off by mentioning Daniel Sullivan's name. Anna's face paled instantly. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. He led her into the living room and confronted her with the footage, with the repeated incidents. "Stop lying," he said firmly, his voice trembling with restrained anger. Anna sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. She tried to claim it was harmless, just a series of rides home when she was working late. But Stephen pressed on every inconsistency. He demanded to know the nature of their relationship. She hesitated, tears forming in her eyes. She insisted Daniel was a flirt, that she had fallen into a small flirtation because she felt lonely and unappreciated at home. She tried to say it had never gone beyond conversation and the occasional dinner, but Stephen could see her words were half-truths at best. Days of tension exploded into a fierce argument. Anna's voice rose to a shrill pitch. Stephen's was harsh with hurt and indignation. They both flung accusations. Stephen berated her for risking the stability of their family, Anna accusing him of neglect, of not seeing her emotional needs. Lucy, hearing the commotion, cracked her door open just enough to catch fragments of heated words. She sat on her bed, hugging her knees, tears sliding down her cheeks, recalling how just a year ago they had all gone on a family trip to the mountains. How happy they seemed back then. How quickly things had changed. Eventually, Stephen's anger reached a boiling point. He told Anna, in no uncertain terms, that he would not live like this. If she wanted out of the marriage, she should just say so. He wasn't going to beg. Anna sobbed, insisting she had made a mistake but still loved him. The more she talked, the more Stephen felt each word unravel his patience. His heart pounded in his chest, and at last he demanded she leave. Stunned, Anna asked where she was supposed to go at this hour. He turned away, stating he didn't care, that she should go to her colleague. Anna left in tears, and Lucy heard the front door slam. She walked into the living room, quietly standing beside her father, who had collapsed onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. Lucy touched his shoulder gently. He looked up at her and tried to smile reassuringly, but his eyes were red. She simply sat next to him, resting her head on his arm, offering the unspoken solidarity a teenage daughter could give. He paused to reflect on the significance of these recent events. Memories swirled inside his mind, a whirlwind of images that carried both warmth and pain. Every moment of happiness he once cherished seemed overshadowed by the cold realization of what had been lost. Yet within him, a determination sparked, an unyielding drive to rebuild what had fractured and to protect those he loved most. Outside, the world carried on with indifferent momentum. Cars rumbled along the streets. The sun rose and fell in its habitual cycle, and neighbors murmured about mundane routines. But behind Stephen's closed door, an emotional battle raged. Doubts, hopes, and questions all fought for prominence, leaving him weary, yet resolute. In the quiet hours of the morning, he would sit alone at the kitchen table, a mug of coffee in his hands, staring at the walls that once echoed with laughter. The ghosts of memory would drift across his consciousness, pressing him to acknowledge how much had changed and how much more would inevitably transform in the days ahead. Each day brought new details to unravel. Each conversation revealed nuances of heartbreak, regret, and the faint possibility of forgiveness. But trust, once shattered, was not easily repaired. It required honesty, a willingness to face past mistakes, and the profound courage to move forward without the familiar illusions that once provided comfort. In moments of solitude, Anna wrestled with her own thoughts. She recalled the first time she met Stephen, the early days of their marriage when everything seemed bright and full of promise. Perhaps time had eroded that bond, or perhaps her own flawed choices had shattered the foundation. She wanted to turn back the clock, to fix what she had broken, but reality offered no such mercy. Lucy found herself caught between childhood and adulthood, forced to confront the complexity of betrayal before she was ready. She felt anger, sadness, and confusion, sometimes all at once. Late at night, she would text her friends vague messages, searching for empathy, for understanding, for any reassurance that normalcy could return. Toby, too young to articulate the swirling emotions in his chest, clung to the simple joys of day-to-day life. A cookie after school, a warm bedtime story, a playful hug. These little anchors grounded him in uncertain waters. He yearned for stability, for the mother and father he remembered before shadows crept into their home. Helen, on the sidelines, watched the family unravel with a heavy heart. She did her best to offer practical help, tidying rooms, preparing meals, walking Toby to school, but she also knew that emotional wounds require more than chores to heal. She spoke gentle words of encouragement, quietly shaping a space where they could begin to mend, if only they chose to step onto that path. Around them, the physical environment mirrored their internal storms. Rain pattered against windows, as if lamenting the lost harmony. The wind howled on restless nights, rattling doors and stirring uneasy dreams. Even on sunny days, the brightness carried an edge of uncertainty, reminding them that clarity can sometimes reveal hidden cracks. Through it all, hope lingered like a faint glow. It glimmered in the possibility that people can change, in the belief that love, though bruised, might still exist in unexpected corners of the heart. The journey would be long, the outcome uncertain. Yet each step forward, no matter how small, carried them toward a horizon that promised a chance at renewal.